Getting a lot of sparks in this studio with a lot of reactions from members of the public. This is a conversation tonight. And we're talking about data protection laws in Kenya. Who is in charge of the amount of data that you share with? Remember, every time you go to a shopping mall, you have to register your data. Every time you're entering into some offices, you must give out your data. For example, your phone number, your ID number, your names. Some companies even ask for your age. And at some point, you have to sign. So who's in charge of this amount of data that you share out there? And that's why the conversation tonight is in the state of data protection here in Kenya and the laws that we have enacted to help us in safeguarding our data. We have our team of experts in the house, and Marie Yambo is also part of us tonight. She's going to share some of the responses that we are getting from the public. What are people saying, Marie?
And a lot of reactions from our viewers back at home. On Facebook, Kenny K. Ken says, so we asked the question, have you been a victim of online scammers? You share your experience with us. So Ken K. Ken says, yes, long ago, and I learned a lot thereafter. Pressing allow without reading terms and conditions of online links shared by the scammers or criminals. Replying email address from online scammers asking for personal details. Text messages via social media accounts asking for contacts or email address used to open accounts. And this will make scammers access your account. So we'll be talking to Muthuri, who will be explaining to us, we asked about the cookies. What does that mean? So this could actually be one of the areas that if you don't understand what they are, so they'll be able to follow, or can I say you're leaving your footprints or digital footprints for that matter. And
maybe even before you proceed, Maria,
yes,
because Kathore, I can see you're nodding your head. Maybe at this point you may want to help us understand what are cookies.
It's definitely what Maria said. So, so when you log into a website and then you access that website, what cookies does is just request to harvest some of your information that will be left depending on the activity that you did in that website. So it's basically leaving some digital footprints in that website. So what it's likely to do is, in the next instance, it's likely to bring you a website that is close to what you are searching and things like that. Yeah.
So it's like, you're just leaving your footsteps.
Yes.
You go somewhere and then you leave your footsteps. And so people may follow just to know who was here.
Yes, it's the same thing, and it's happening with a lot of tech companies. Facebook, for example, yesterday was slapped, was held accountable by the Irish Office of the Data Protection Commissioner because of doing the same thing and doing personalized advertisements based on the website that you've searched, but also your geographical reach.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
You can find out that you write an email to your friend, I am flying to New York and I'm organizing a wedding for my cousin. Then you receive an email, someone says, if you want to hire a limousine, could you please contact this number? Which means you left a file and somebody picked that file and with your email address now contact you.
Very good. Maria,
so it's almost like your behavior on the internet or on your social media. They are able to track and give you more or less like what you need, so giving you options of people that you can actually engage with. Now Mutuku Ivuta says, yes, I have been a victim of scammers after my great friend account was hacked and was scammed a whooping 5,000 shillings. After that my FB account was hacked. But there's something interesting here. Erickson Ekuru says, for sure someone scammed me before and they told me that I can earn money online, earn over $20 a day. He told me that all I needed to do is register with a fee of 1,500. After that, I was blocked. So you see, these are some of the issues that Kenyans are grappling with, but I think it's just because of lack of awareness in terms of how lucrative is your data. And Muthuri, that is what I would like to know. How lucrative is my data, and how do you value my data? Because at the end of the day, the data cannot be valuable, can I say, to the data processor or the data controller if you know your rights as the data subject. So how lucrative is data?
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. And that is a question I'm sure the team in the House will be willing to respond to. And who is willing to go? Do you want to respond to Marie's question? How precious is her personal data?
As far as I'm concerned, I've heard people talk about this privacy and confidentiality. I'm the opposite of it. You've heard people who live their life in social media. I'm going for lunch, I'm going for breakfast, and all photos and everything is out there. I can tell you, in one way or the other, you're on the internet. So for me, so long as you're doing a decent thing, you have nothing to worry about. And at the same time, we also have to know what is it that you bring to the social media and what you can't bring to the social media. At the same time, as I said, there's something which can expose you to theft. For example, anything about money. Like if you hear, are you willing to save your password in this website? For example, you are transacting with your card. You don't do that. There are some things you just don't do. So for me, there are some things I've separated. You never see them close to the internet. And there's something, for example, my photos, what I'm doing, those things everybody knows. Because if you don't post on social media, I'll take a photo with you and post there. So if you say you're not on Facebook, your face is on Facebook. So I'm sure there are some things that are you can't actually hide from in one way or the other. You see this thing called Google Earth. Do you know that if you are using Google Earth, they can show you a street live, for example, in Europe, and you see people walking on the street. At that time where you park your car, you can see it. So someone can even see your face without even you knowing you're being seen. So there are so many things that you cannot be controlled. In fact, sitting back there worrying about your data can be more depressing than just live your life. What I can say, live your life, but be cautious on things where people can harm you with, especially to do with money and identity. Identity and money is key.
Good. Yes, Kathure.
I want to partly disagree with the good Prof. I think we have to be very, very keen not to blame the data subject when it comes to breach of their data. Remember, you as a data controller, you have your responsibilities that are provided for in the Act. One of those responsibilities is to ensure that you do not breach, there is no breach of your data subject act, your data subject data. And if that happens, either by not knowing, you're supposed to report within 72 hours. So there is that huge responsibility in the Data Protection Act is upon the data controller and the data processor. Now, if you look at you joining, for example, social media platform, you give your personal data. Even to join, you give your email address, you give your name. Sometimes you're asked about your street and things like that. So if that information is given, you as a data controller, you must have put efforts to ensure that this information that has been put in place is safe. You've done what I talked about, the data protection risk assessment to ensure that all the risks for this data that we've collected is safe. Two, when you share this data, for example, to a data processor, that you have, and this is provided for in the Act, that there is a contractual obligation between the two of you to ensure that it happens. The other thing I want to mention is even your photo is not safe. Because you saw the other day, someone went to, there was a complaint at the commission by a Kenyan whose photo was used by Oppo, and Oppo was slapped with a 5 million fine. So even you cannot say I'll share this, I'll not share this. It's very difficult in this situation. We can be aware of what to share and what not to share, but we should not shift the blame and start forgetting that this is the data subject has got rights, and the data processor and controller have got responsibilities.
Whitney, I mean, you brought in the issue of cookies here, and so I know we all of us are tempted to say accept cookies because you just want to read that article, you just want to watch that movie, you just want to to access that site, but before you accept cookies or before you reject cookies, what are you supposed to know first? Or what kind of questions are you supposed to ask yourself first?
Thank you, O'Brien. Okay, first of all, before we even go to the website, going back to your previous question about the privacy of our data, we do know that there are a lot of data has economic use, and there are a lot of data brokers within the country, and of course globally we know that they're there.
Data brokers?
Yes, data brokers. They use our information for they use our information for economic value. Be it of course that there's a proliferation of e-commerce, meaning that many businesses are taking place online. So for them to acquire some customers, or also to retain some customers, or to know the trends of their customers, the behavior of their customers, they need that data, meaning we have some data processors or also data controllers who are selling our data without our consent. But we also have, you said something at the beginning where when you go to a building, probably they're asking you for some for some documents. We know that in Kenya that there are some laws which allow once you want to access a building, they can ask you for ID, and that's a legal basis. So we do have some places where, be it for legal basis, they do ask you for your data and you have to comply. When you're going to the supermarket, you also mentioned that when you're going to the supermarket, these are things that you have to consent, because probably they want to use it for marketing. But if you do not consent, I do not believe that they should be sending you those unsolicited messages. But also for contractual basis, as my colleague has said, be it a bank, be it an insurance company. So we do see that there's some instances where your data is required, be it for legal basis, for contractual basis, or be it for probably just for vital interest. Maybe you're in a life-threatening situation and your data is needed. There's no way you can just say, I did not consent to it, that I will, why did my data come out? But for some reasons, your data, you must give out your data. So when you come into to the issue of the website, I do believe, as I've said, it's the culture of, people, Africans, I would say, to overshare, or probably we do not read the fine print, we do not read the terms and conditions, or probably when I'm logging into an app, I've not checked the terms and conditions. My mic is on. Some people say algorithms, but probably even the app is just listening to your conversations. Your location is on every time you're in an app, you're logging into an app. Your location should always be off if you're not using the application. So I do believe that when it comes to be it cookies, be it the terms and conditions, your microphone is on, the location, I do believe that Kenyans really have to be sensitized on the importance of their data and to give as minimal information as they can to online platforms, or also just going into these buildings. I do believe that ID is a legal requirement for you to give out your personal identity. But probably once they start asking for things that going overboard, they start asking for your biometrics. That's when you just you can totally say no as a data subject. That is your right. So I think Kenyans just need to read the law and not to take everything as it has to be consent. There are some places where you have to give out your information, but also when it comes to technology and in the internet space, you just need to be more careful and to read the terms and conditions. And also, for cookies, bit cookies, and it's something that you really want, you can go to the cookies and select that the ones you want to use.
Manage cookies.
Yeah, you exactly manage cookies, be it for operational, maybe you just want to access that website, maybe you don't want it for marketing purposes. So you can actually just make it for what you want to get to access that website. But as we know, a lot of awareness is needed on that.
Is needed on that issue. Mariam, you want to interject?
Yeah, I'm still, I appreciate as Whitney is saying that, there are areas when you go, then you have to share your data and all that. But then again, I think for me, what I would want to know from Muthuri is, what rights do I have? For instance, this has been a debate for a very long time. Like when you're entering a building, that you leave your ID number. In fact, initially you had to even leave your phone number, but do they really need it? But then again, how long should a data, processor or a data controller for that matter, stay with my information, something of that sort. But another thing that I want him to also really, really tell us is the monetization of data. How much are these brokers making out of our data? Because then we would be able to say, by the time you're clicking on those cookies, or you're following a certain, downloading some apps, then you know what you're doing. You're actually making business for other people. So is there more a value? Monetization of data, and how much could it cost?
And also to add, I write a question too. to what Marie is asking in regard to, you know, the kind of information that you share, and more so when you're entering into you know, private property, even when you are entering into government institutions. What does the law say? You know, are you supposed to leave your ID? Is the law clear on this, or what is the legal position on this issue?
Great. Those are very many questions, and then with many aspects to it. But to start off, I think to respond to the question of the amount of information or data that you're supposed to share, linking that to the right. So first and foremost, when you're giving out your data, the first right you have is for you to be told what is that data meant to do, what is the purpose of that collection. And sometimes it is not even told by a word of mouth. Sometimes it comes in what we call a data protection notice. Like, for example, in a supermarket should be there just saying, we collect your data and this is what we use it for, and if we need to share it with a data processor, the same is communicated to you. Now, in terms of what does the law say in terms of data processing and what can be processed or not. So there are exemptions, and Whitney had started talking about the exemptions that the law provides when it comes to the data that is processed. So one of course is that around national security, which is clearly stipulated in the Act. The other one is around the public good, which an example was given. So if, for example, you've disappeared and then information needs to go out for us to know, to look for this person, so that information, your name will go, maybe your photo and things like that. There are again now instances where the Act gives the power to the data commissioner to decide on whatever instance, and one of them is what Doctor was talking about when it comes, for example, in research. The other thing is, for example, journalistic exemption. For you to cover a story objectively and to also report on it objectively, there is that exemption. The other one is for household good. For example, my partner sends me a letter, there will be information about me on the envelope of that letter and things like that. So there is those exemption. Now, when it comes to when you're giving information in buildings and hotels, I think what we did is we copy pasted what is in the Innkeepers Act in the European Union to what we have the Restaurant Act and what have you. So the information that you're supposed to give, and it's only 3 information, but it's your name, your phone number, and your ID. The signatures, the biometrics, or whatever else they are collecting are not supposed to be. And Whitney has insisted. Are you
supposed to leave your ID?
No, you're not supposed to leave your ID.
With the security guards?
You're supposed to just write. You're not. The law does not talk about you leaving the ID, the actual ID. So that's not what is supposed to be.
But every time, I mean, we go to a lot of these buildings. I mean, one of the requirements is that give us your ID, and then we give you a visitor's card in exchange.
I'm a lawyer, and my social foundation of law lecturer, Doctor taught me that ignorance of the law is no defense.
It's no defense.
So your ignorance meant you leave your documents there. But no, you're not supposed to.
So
you're supposed to write.
You have to know that you are on a national platform.
Yes.
And the information that you are sharing is very critical.
Yes.
So are you saying that, you know, legally no Kenyan is supposed to leave their national identity or passport when they are entering into a building?
It depends which building. I talked about the Restaurant Act. So when you're going to the restaurants, it's a copy-paste of what we call the Innkeepers Act in most of the European countries. So when you're going to the hotels, that is what you're supposed to not.
What about when you're going to an office?
That's not described for in the data protection law. So what you're supposed to leave. This is where now comes the exemption that I talked about for national security. If, for example, I don't know where you're going, CID offices or whatever. If, for example, the data protection commissioner provides for other agencies to do the same, then that can be done.
Very well. Yeah. You wanted to say something?
What he's talking about, as I told you, and in fact he disagreed with me, and I like disagreements because this knowledge has been born out of disagreements. And I like the progressiveness of knowledge when people disagree. But I'm trying to tell you, the amount of effort you can spend trying to protect your data and the amount of benefit you can get is, I don't even think you will spend the rest of your life worrying about your data that you may not even be a happy man in this country. In fact, Obran, we start walking from town to town, building to building, you'll find even a place where they tell you, even in the embassy, you not only leave the ID, even your phone, you leave it with them.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
So Can you imagine someone has taken your ID and has taken your phone and they are staying with it somewhere? I don't understand these things. What I'm trying to say is that if at all the Data Protection Act says that we should not leave them, then why is the enforcement? Because why should... Today I was in a building.
Protection Act saying,
today I was at a building, and to mention International Lifehouse, and I had to apologize for having forgotten my ID in the car while I was showing him electronic. Some don't even want to talk about where you take a photocopy and you show them. When you want to go to any hotel, when you're checking, you have to give your ID and they photocopy it. Are these things allowed? For me, it's amazing. It's amazing.
As a lawyer, what's your response to this?
I've responded. So when it comes to a restaurant, that's what is supposed to be done. When it's in the other buildings, I don't know, offices and whatever, the law is not clear on what should be done. So, and I talked about...
And so what should be done? When the law is not clear.
So that's a lacuna in law. And the Data Protection Act, for example, has got a lot of grey areas. It's a new law, and the regulation came in the other day.
And so when there is a legal lacuna, then it is open to multiple interpretations.
Yes.
And that's why, O'Brien, you're a public figure, just like myself and Whitney. When you start going, even Kathure too,
and Marie,
go to offices and you start saying, I can't give my ID, you will be the worst person in this world.
Data protection.
In fact, when you're a public figure, you are entitled to comply to everything because you are just fearing someone might make a mess out. Look at Nancy Baraza's case, where she was passing through security, and maybe she got out of control and touched the nose of that person, and it was a big news. So I'm trying to say,
I can see Whitney is really passionate about what you're saying.
By being a public figure, and not even forget about public figure, there are so many Kenyans that are having this challenge. In fact, this lacuna he's talking about is big. And that's why I told you, even in Google. Do you know why Google gives you free email address? Because they data mine your data. If you sit back here and you want where your data cannot be collected, don't have an email, you should not have a phone, you will even be risking your life by trying to protect your data, and you'll die. So you're protecting your data at the expense of your life. For me, the cost-benefit analysis shows me, have my data, I'm okay, I'm not a criminal. What will you do with my data if you find out that I'm married and I have 2 children? What will you find with my data if you know my phone number? I'm a citizen, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm trying to say that in this country, in Europe, it's very clear what needs to be done, and people do respect those things.
And
without having, in fact, the guy is the security guard there, don't understand what data commissioner says. So if you start arguing, there's data law, what's your data law? I've been told by my boss, you can't come in.
This is the law here.
This is the law here.
You either abide or you leave.
Or you go out.
And this is what I wanted to find out from you. I mean, Kathure, I mean, if you are a law-abiding citizen, you know, you live a straight life. Would you really be concerned about who has your data and what they are doing with it?
Yes, I mean, that's the foundation of this conversation that we are having today. And in your introduction, you talked about the value of data. You might be a law-abiding citizen, you're doing everything right, and what have you. But then behind you, there is what Whitney talked about, the brokers. There is
data
tech
brokers.
Companies who monetize data, because for them data is what they're using. I've heard people talking about data being the new gold, the new oil. It might be lucrative as oil, as gold, but the difference is data might not go extinct. To always have data, people will be born.
It's infinite.
It's in AI is coming, and it needs a lot of data as well to feed into it. So you can be a law-abiding citizen, but then behind you, things are happening with your data. It's being used for many other reasons.
And I like the you know, what Whitney was talking about. I mean, do not overshare. Do not share what is more than needed. Okay, and ensure that you are sharing your information to the right people at the right time. Okay, and for the right purpose. Whitney, you want to say something?
Also, just to buttress his point, I do think that data is very, personal data is very important, because you also know that data at times is used for discriminatory purposes, or you can be trolled online. You know, people have committed suicide because probably of being trolled. There's some things we don't want out there, probably our age, our health status, that is very sensitive information, our marital status. So I do believe, other than the economic...
Have you ever been a victim of
So discrimination of information. So I do, other than the commercial purpose of information, it's very vital to keep it.
Have you ever been a victim of data breach?
Pardon?
Have you ever been a victim of data breach yourself?
No. Yes, identity theft at some point.
Identity theft?
Yes.
How did you deal with it?
I reported to the app because it was on an app, and they were able to take down that page. So yes, yes. First of all, but we also have to say that before you go to the data commissioner, the office of the data commissioner, you first have to report to the app or to the institution. You just don't complain to the data commissioner immediately. You can just first launch a complaint with the app, and they can deal with it. If they were not able to deal with it, then now you probably just now escalate it to the office of the data commissioner. But it was identity theft, and I was able to deal with it.
Let me tell you one common one. You're a beautiful woman. There's a woman who has put her photo in her profile page that she's the one. And this is very common. I'm sure maybe this is where you suffered. People would say that if they look this way, I'm sure so many women have suffered who are beautiful, who are used, for example, me when I was a politician, what they do is that somebody will have a phone number with the image of your campaign manager telling you, Mheshimiwa, send to me a 50K. And you are seeing the photo of your campaign manager and he's asking for 50K. What is it you sent? You discover it's not him. And actually nowadays people can register a name saying, oh, Brian Kimani, with your name and image. And if you ask me, for example, if Mariambo tells you, oh, Brian, I'm in studio, I can't get out of here, I don't know how I can get money, I want to buy something quickly, send me 10K, and you are seeing her image there, Mariambo, you'll send without thinking, only to find out that some other person somewhere is the one who has sent you the message, Mariambo is sleeping at home comfortably. These things have happened. What I'm trying to say is that if you are careful enough, at that point when you want to remove money, there's a way you have to verify and say whether the right person or not. But nevertheless, I can tell you, O'Brien, you can sit down from January to December worrying about identity theft. They'll steal if they want.
They still steal
the amount of
because
money
they are
you
much
need
more
to
smarter
invest,
than you are.
the amount of money you need to invest and the amount of time you need to invest to be fully protected is too much that the benefits cannot actually be consumed. So according to me, live your life, try what you can, but for me, I'm happy that so far, so good.
So far, so good. But I mean, you cannot just rest on your, laurels, hoping that because it has been good for you, it will forever be good.
In God we trust.
The
rest bring data.
and Brian, there is this also issue as far as data protection is concerned. As you are aware right now that the government is planning, I know, has rolled out some of online services. 5,000 of them will be rolled out. In I don't know whether it's is it in 2 months' time or but the government plans to roll out almost like 5,000 services online. And so my question to Muthure is, do we have enough safeguards, to protect? Because 5,000 services, that's huge. So it's almost like all manner of services that we want to access will be online. That is number one. And then the other question I would like you to also answer is, how do data protection laws in our country, how does that compare to the general data protection regulation in the EU? Is there something that we can borrow from there? Are there comparisons? Yeah.
Okay. To start with the first question in terms of government's rollout on the digitization, I think that's the 2022-2032 digital footprint, which if you look at it across the 5 pillars, there is a lot of issues around data protection. It's actually one of the cross-cutting theme in the whole the footprint. Do we have enough safeguard? Government in this instance now becomes the data controller, and just for purposes of the viewers to know, the data controller is that individual person or a legal entity that for certain purposes does collect our data, and government can be one of them. The only exemption is civil registries, so which collect data for their own reason. So my assumption is one of the things that we pride ourselves as a country is we're the Silicon Savannah of Africa. We've seen our government having the blueprint. We've seen the Office of Data Protection Commissioner, a lot of development in the Ministry of ICT. Our hope is that while doing this, there will be the government will be able to put up enough measures, both in system procedure and the procedures in the data that they collect from the data subject. The other thing is people are very more aware of their data. We've seen what happened during the Huduma number. We saw when telcos were rolling out the SIM registration, and people came out to say you are collecting more than what you need. And one of the issues was collecting photos and things like that. So even as government does this, I know people will be watching. They'll be held accountable by both citizens, but also civil society organizations that work around digital rights. In terms of comparison between our Data Protection Act of 2019 and the general principles of data protection, the EU one, is that we borrowed a lot from that law. And just to mention, African countries are now coming up with all these data protection laws. Tanzania recently passed theirs. We started with Rwanda in East Africa and then went to Uganda, Kenya, and then other countries. And that's the same thing that happened in the European Union. Every country started coming with their own laws, but then they realized, because most of these data you're talking about is all about money. It's about business, doing business. And so there was a lot of challenges, for example, in transfer of data from one country to another. There's what is accepted in this law and what is not accepted in the other country. And so they ended up coming with that general regulation for them.
As we wind up, in the interest of time, I also want to hear from you, in 30 seconds. If I was to know that, there is data breach or somebody or some company, they're using my data without my consent. What am I supposed to do?
So you have your own remedies. So the Act provides for two things. One is you can report to the Office of Data Protection Commissioner, and we know that there are already more than 2,000 people who've reported, and 800 of those cases have been onboarded for investigation. The other things, you can sue for damages. If for example, your photo is being used by a company for advertisement, or your information is being used, you can also go to court and sue for damages as well. So those are the two remedies.
Those are the two remedies you have. And the third one is you can decide to throw your hands like Prof and say,
that's not what we encourage.
I'm a good man.
In God we trust. That's what he said. Gentlemen, we have come to this critical juncture whereby now we do the scorecarding, which is very important, for this show. And tonight we just want to focus on two areas, and I want to start with Whitney. For your information, Kathore, this is our ritual. We go through scorecarding after every program, and so you're going to learn things. It's a very interesting concept.
Okay.
So I want to hear from Whitney. When you look at the Office of the Data Protection, is the Office of Data Protection Officer well capacitated to deal with data breaches?
First, as we've said, we know that, thank you, O'Brien, we know that the law was enacted in 2019, but the office was set up, I do believe, in 2020 or 2021. So, of course, there's some loopholes in probably how they're resourced and also maybe the capacity of that office. But I do believe that the laws are in there. We've seen them send some letters for enforcement to some of the organizations. So I do believe that there's still some lacuna in there, but they do, as we've said, it's a very young office, so we are yet to see its full potential. Yes.
And so how would you rate that?
A 3.
You give it a 3?
Yes.
3 out of 5?
Yes.
Very good. Prof, is the Office of Data Protection well capacitated to deal with data breaches? How do you rate it?
I'll give it a 2 because even if you ask, I don't know how many Kenyans even know that exist, where it is, the physical location, and even the terms and conditions, how to engage them. They haven't publicized themselves, they have not communicated themselves. They remain as a lacuna as the constitution on the data, as far as concerns. I give it a 2. And the other thing is that since it's an enactment, has it encouraged Kenyans to share more of their data, or even to make Kenyans be able to know what to share and what not to share? So
very good. So you're giving it 2. Kathore.
So as someone who've interacted with the office and worked with it, I will come to its rescue. I would say it's not properly capacitated, but it's trying its best. I've seen it trying to, I think the other week they had training for data protection officers. They have tried to do a lot of consultation with people. It might not be the best, but looking at the budget that they were given, I think it was 500,000 USD. It's also a new office that came into place, but also most importantly, what I would say, it's the fact that it's not yet fully independent.
So how do you rate this?
Not their fault, but by the design, I'll give it not fully capacitated at 2.5.
2.5.
Yeah.
Very good. 2.5. That's for Kathore. The second question: are the fines for data breaches strong enough? How do you rate it?
5 million? It depends, because it is just, let's say, a ballpark number. It doesn't depend on how much. If you steal data for Fred Ogola, maybe it's just worth 1 million. But if you steal the data of President William Ruto, I'm sure that will be a lot of money. So I'm sure they should also find a way to categorize them. Just saying 5 million is just a ballpark number. Also, we have not looked at the damage. So I believe that this should not just be like 5 million, because someone can say, if I can make 100 million, and the fine will be 5 million. It makes sense to do that.
So
I'll give it a 2.
You give it a 2. Very good. What about Whitney?
Thank you. When you do a comparative analysis within countries, within the region, and also other jurisdictions overseas, be it Europe, you see that the penalties for Kenya are very, very low. I do believe that there should be severe penalties for people who are harvesting our data, and also just data brokers. So yes, I would give it like probably for the penalties, I would give it a 2. I think they need to be penalized more so that we can enhance the deterrence effect.
So you're giving it a 2?
Yes.
And you're giving it a 2.5?
No, 2. Me, I don't
you
give
also
half.
said 2. Did you copy from Prof?
No.
We have different
For
reasons.
different reasons.
All right, wonderful. What about Kathore?
We are a very punitive society. So there are 2 kinds of, I think, punishment in data protection in Kenya, and that's what the difference between our law and the DPR where we copy it from. So there is both the civil and criminal sanction. So I think for me, when it comes to civil sanction, I think the penalty is very low. The 10 million or 1% of last year, what is it called, the turnover is very low. But when it comes to criminal sanction, I think it's very high. Because often at times all these are perpetrated by companies who should be given civil sanction. How will I rate it? Again, a 2.5.
2.5.
Yeah.
So we have 2 for you, 2 for Whitney, and 2.5 for Kathore.
Yeah.
Very good indeed. And as you can see, the numbers are on your screen actually. So let's now go to the scoreboard. Mariambo, what is the opinion of the public?
Well, quite a number of reactions still coming online, but let me just read one of them. That is from Chris Oweke, who says, and remember the question was, have you been a victim of online scammers? And so Chris Oweke is saying, yes, I was purchasing a Lipa Mdogo Mdogo phone and told to deposit 1,000 shillings in order to get the phone. I was given the pay bills and KCB Vuma account number. I sent the money, after which I didn't receive the phone. No one was receiving my calls after many attempts of follow-up. So again, there you go, you click on an app or something of that sort, and you think you're actually dealing with the right people. And so you get scammed. So yes, O'Brien, that is those are some of the views from our viewers back at home. So from me, I know we are almost winding up. I want to thank you very much for taking the time, to interact with us back at home and even to listen to the conversations. And I hope you've learned a lot in as far as data protection is concerned. What constitutes your data, personal data, sensitive data, and all that. What are some of, procedures that you can follow to report data breach or and all that. So thank you once again so much for tuning in. We hope to see you again on Tuesday next week. My name is Barry Yambo.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Maria, for taking us through this scoreboard and, of course, getting us to listen to what our viewers are talking about. You have been watching the scorecard live from Broadcasting House. Remember, we do this every Tuesday as from 10 o'clock all the way to 11. I can see time is well spent because we're now coming to almost 20 past 11. My name is O'Brien Kimani. On behalf of the entire crew that made this production possible, thank you very much indeed. And also thank you to our panelists for also finding time to be with us. I know it's very cold, and so the temptations of staying indoors, wrapped up in warm clothing, I mean, is very high, but you also took the risk to be here. Professor, asante sana for your time. Let's see you on Tuesday, God willing.
Thank you.
Whitney Misheni, asante sana for your time as well.
Thank you.
And to Kathure, thank you for making it for the first time, and we hope that we'll engage you again in the future, inshallah. Thank you for watching. Have a good night. Bye for now.